Good evening, everybody. Yeah, summer holidays seem to go fly by. I don't know about everybody else. Here we are, back in the term. Tonight's session, teaching reading to pupils with Down syndrome. We're going to have a very quick look at what we know about children, reading in children with Down syndrome, and thinking about some of the factors that predict reading. We're really going to spend the most of tonight thinking about beginning reading or beginner readers, before we think about sight word reading, phonics and phonological awareness, and reading comprehension. So I want to be thinking about all the areas of reading that we're going to be targeting with our students. So reading in children with Down syndrome, reading levels of children with Down syndrome are hugely variable. So we'll have many children, whenever there's a research project, there tends to be some children who aren't doing any reading yet, just getting started with their reading, and there'll be some pupils who maybe are reading, their sight word reading is a strength. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. We've had a bit of research in terms of reading in children with Down syndrome, a bit more than we have on other areas such as number. So there's a bit more information out there. And all of the kind of reading intervention studies that are done show really pleasing results and progress, although we certainly do need more research, particularly on reading comprehension. I wanted to flag early on, you may be aware, or if not, you may want to go make yourselves aware of a thing called the Reading and Language Intervention for Children with Down syndrome. That it came out of a research project between Down Syndrome Education International and the University of York. And from that intervention study, there has been produced a guide for you to have a look at and for you to support you in terms of teaching reading for people with Down syndrome. So just wanted to let you know that that is out there. Print's obviously important, can be used to support language and speech. So you're learning new words, you may want to bring in some of your speech targets in there. It might be a particular sound that you're working on. You can highlight it in your print and be a prompt to remember to target your production. Used to support language, syntax and grammar. So you'd be able to think of things like using connectives, you have and because in there to practice, or things like the difference between jumping, jumped. It's all a bit visual when it's in print. It's written down there, it's not going away, you haven't got to just remember it, hold on to it. So it can be really useful in terms of supporting our pupils. So we think about getting started with reading. Early reading skills for those maybe who are coming in reception, that turning pages, one page at a time, bit of a fine motor skill there, understanding that you turn from the front to the back, you hold the book around, pointing to text. Pointing to text, I think, is a hugely helpful skill if you understand that you point to a word and you say a word, because once you've got that, you've kind of got a prompt to yourself, or the child has for themselves, point to that, and I'm waiting for you to say something. Finding pictures, finding words, knowing the difference between the two, and those familiar repetitive stories that children can join in with, like the bear hunt. I might not be reading it yet, but I certainly understand how this works, and I can join in and get kind of going with what reading's all about. It's important that children are given the opportunity to experience a range of reading books. Real books, books that kind of every other child has access to within the school. Now, as the child moves through school, it might be that they take off with the reading, or it might be that they find reading a bit more challenging. So be thinking about not only choosing a book that the child can read, but actually choosing one that they can take home and their parents can read to them and have that practice. Make sure that they're getting access to all that kind of different vocabulary. This one's about space, this one's about dinosaurs. I'm getting all of that lovely language input, even if I'm not able to read it all myself. Maybe I'm going to just look out for the target words that I have in my sentences. Personal books, I'm going to say a little bit more about personal books in just a second, but they can be really motivating. They will be probably about the child. They may well have one as part of a speech or language work that they're doing, being photos of the child themselves, photos of their family, maybe photos of their friends or their pet, and that can be really motivating for them to want to read them. Oh, it's me, it's my dad, it's brilliant. Particularly for those who are just getting started with reading, if you think I'm struggling to find a suitable book. And right from the beginning, when we're getting started with reading, we'll be looking for books with words in. Now, some reading schemes I'm sure you'll be familiar with start without any words in the book, and they're all about the child practicing their language and telling the story. They're not, they're very tricky for our children. So like I said, I'd have a range of books. You can send that one home, maybe one you can talk to with your parents, but if you want to get going with reading, we really want to have those written words in there. Our pupils are unlikely to have some of that great language, particularly kind of in the infants, to be able to come up with a story, use that narrative language. You might want to come back to those a bit later on. Maybe for those who've got some children now who are reading a bit, their language has come on, and go back to those to look at those narrative skills. So while you're about choosing a reading book, have a look at what your reading scheme is. And again, if everybody in the class has got a reading scheme book, I'll have one of those to go home and to have a read of. Have a look in there in terms of vocabulary. Is it vocabulary that the child knows? That's really helpful. And those reading schemes where you learn some words and those words come up over and over and over again are going to be useful. I'm still a bit old-fashioned. I'm still a fan of the Oxford Reading Tree. But if you learn Biff and Chip, any book you pick up, those words are going to come up in again, over and over again. So think about the reading scheme and is it suitable? When we're thinking about a reading book, we really want a book that the child can read over 90% of the words in there already. So it's not, I'm trying to sound out every word. I want a book where I've already got most of the words. It's just these new 10%, which are going to be the ones that I'm going to need a bit of help with. And if you find that you've got a child who's trying to work out almost every word, that book's too tricky. We need to change that for an easier one. So what does that mean for our beginner readers? Might mean that you need to adapt or create books. So I've talked about those personal books. You might start off with a book all about me. It could be about, maybe it's about starting school and school vocabulary. This is my classroom. This is my teacher. This is whatever it might be. You can hear I've got that repetitive this is running through. The child may have a conversation diary, which is a book that they take with them to sport conversation, easily enough, but normally between two settings. So they take it into school, they take it home from school, and it would say in there that what they've been doing. So at the end of the school day, school staff might pop in there a picture of the child writing, and they might write underneath, I did some writing, something like that. You could tie that into the words that you're focusing on. So if we think about this is my writing, this is my story, whatever it might be, but you can keep having that come up over and over again. And that also is a great resource in terms of those narrative language skills we're going to think about when we talk about reading comprehension. So retelling what's happened, summarising, could be used to target a little bit of word reading. Great for answering questions, or who did you go with? Who's that there? What are you doing? Where did you go? The other thing that you could do, particularly for older students who are still just starting off with reading, is think about who their favourite characters are. Who are they going to be motivated by? Who do they want to read about? Is it about Spider-Man or Marvel characters? Then actually coming up with Googling some pictures and putting some easy sentences underneath might be a way of creating a book that's more age appropriate and more suitable and more motivating, rather than I'm still on those Oxford Reading Tree books at secondary school. I want to be thinking about a range of texts and materials, so fiction, non-fiction, and not every book has to be challenging in terms of my reading. I just want to have some books I can pick up and read for fun. So when you're thinking about choosing your books, there's a lot of things there really to think about, making sure that we have got those as suitable text at a suitable level. Hello? Something in there. There we go. So in terms of sight word reading, children with Down syndrome typically find learning from looking easier with a visual learning strength. So they see something and we find it easier to remember that thing. And so sight word reading, seeing that word and just remembering what that word is, can be an area of strength for our pupils. So the word elephant, you just see it, you remember it's elephant, that's our sight word reading, or whole word reading, you might refer to it as. Children with Down syndrome are often introduced in preschool to sight words to support speech and language. As I said about the conversation diary, they may already have one of those. They may have a book to support putting 2 words together. So it might have in there, mummy's eating, daddy's eating. So that could be a suitable support. So they may already know some sight words. The first thing I would be doing is just checking what they've done before they got to you, whether that's in reception or whether they've just transitioned up. Is there a list of up-to-date words that they know where they are? And print is an aid to memory. So I said about this visual learning strength associated with Down syndrome. It can then, once we get into reading, that can help us learn new words, learn new vocabulary, go back, look at things, go back over the question. I haven't had to remember what the teacher said, it's written down there for me. So we can really use that sight word reading as it develops. And of course, when you're reading, you're supporting that spoken practice of words and sentences. So you might be using words, reading words that they're not yet using in their spoken language. Great way of practicing those words, particularly those things that we said were a bit challenging, that grammar and those connectives. So to start with, I would be thinking about, want to do a bit of an assessment. Let's just run through, let's start with the first 100 high frequency words. Have they got any? And if they haven't, that's where I would be starting, particularly with school and reading, looking for those high frequency words. And I'd be choosing words that make a carrier phrase or a sentence starter. And I should say a little bit more about that in a second. Other words that you might want to choose, personal words. So words that are about me that I'm going to want to use, or think about our Marvel fan, might be those are the words, those are what I want to talk about, those are what I'm interested in, they're personal to me. You might be choosing topic words. If you've got a reader who's already got a bank of words, you might be thinking, right, our next topic is going to be Egypt. I'm going to target some words about Egypt. So if you know those words when we get there, that's going to make accessing worksheets, writing sentences, using vocabulary boards much easier. Or it might be, if you've got a reading scheme where you've got some characters, like we said about, that come up over and over again, you might decide, I'm going to go for those words because I know I'm going to get lots of practice of them. Once you've chosen them, you want to be, I would start by choosing maybe 4 to 6. That would be my starter. And as my reading develops, I would still be looking at, okay, what are my reading targets? I want those 6 words around Egypt, or those 6 words around school trip we're going on, or whatever it might be. You could do them as flashcards. So as we do with lots of children, just look at the word, remember it, say it, carry out, what's this word? And lots of practice. The other way that's useful in terms of teaching visually is matching. So we start by matching the same word, then we'll do some selecting once you've matched it lots of times, and I think you might know it, but I shall say a little bit more about that in just a second. Once you've learnt your first 4, just remembering them, like I said, this is often a strength, and then you're going to move on to some new words. So I would put those words in a words I know envelope or tin, whatever it might be, and then I'll introduce a new 4 to 6 words that I'm learning. When I go through my words I'm learning, I'm going to choose a few out of the tin, words I know, just to make sure I'm going over those, because you want that really regular revision. And we can tie in to other activities, other reading activities, and into writing, which is actually our next Twinkl session, even better, because you're going to get more and more practice of them, and support that generalisation of using them in spoken language, but also in written language as well. So using in context, as I just said, may need to demonstrate, you might need to think about how the pupil's going to demonstrate their knowledge without relying on spoken output. If their talking's not very clear, how are you going to know if they got that word right or not? So it might be you're going to put out your 4 words on the desk and say, oh, where is, can they find it? Yeah, brilliant, we know that you've got that one. And it's really important that we develop, when we're choosing our targets, we're thinking about words that are going to help a sentence. So I don't really want 10 words I can't do anything with, that just kind of stand on their own. I want to be thinking right from early on, how can I use these words? How can I teach these words? Show how they work and how they work together. So I would go to my 100 high frequency words, and I'd have a look to choose my first 4 that are going to be useful in terms of making a sentence. So I've gone for this is a and the, and I would get myself a lotto board. This is a and the, and I'm going to match those words. This, can you find the same? And of course, finding the same means that they're really, really looking at that word. They've got to really look at it while you say it. This, encourage them to have a go at saying it. This, great, put it on the same. Where is it? Is this on this one? There it is. This. That's it. You say it again. This, brilliant. Loads of practice. Do your flashcards. They're okay, and for lots of children, they work very well. But you might say this, and they say, oh, yeah, this. I'll copy what you're saying, but I'm looking at what my friend's doing over there in the water tray. So match is a good way of getting that practice. Once they've matched them quite a lot, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, I think they're starting to recognise these. I'll put the word cards on the table and I'll say, oh, can you find the? Now we're starting to know that the child is recognising these words. Always encourage them to have a go at saying them. If the child is signing, you could be asking them to sign as well. So I've got my sight words, and I want to put them in a book. So I've just got an example there of an adapted personal book. So this is one that we would have made for the child doing Romans. So we've got this is a Roman. It could just be this is a man. This is a chariot. So you can see I've got this is a, and this is how we use them in a sentence. Those are my sight words. Easy. So once you've got your first 4, look at, okay, what could be other words to be helpful in terms of making a sentence. So I've gone for I can see here. So I can do here is a, here is the, I can see. And so on. Once you've got your first 100, next 200, and then of course you are well and truly away. So in addition, so that's what I'm going to be doing my sight words. In addition to my sight words, I'm going to be targeting phonics or alphabetic reading. Now, what we know about children with Down syndrome, they're typically good at learning facts, just like we said about, I can remember that word elephant. We have a strength often in learning the letter sounds. So I may well know all of my all of the letters in the alphabet. I may also know my digraphs and trigraphs. Just remembering it, that's often a strength, and we'll often have a big bank of those, although we might not be able to do a lot with them in terms of blending and segmenting, which is often more challenging. Children with Down syndrome, we have a high, incredibly frequent, incredibly common to have difficulties with hearing. So over 80% of our children will be having experiencing hearing difficulties. We have difficulties with verbal short-term memory, so remembering what we've heard and then doing something with that information. We also have delays with vocabulary. And if you think about blending, you're going to say, oh, it's k, at. I've got to hear those sounds, might not have heard them all. I've got to remember those sounds, and then I've got to do something with them. And do I know that word? If we're doing, let's say, pin, do I know what a pin is? If you've got vocabulary delay, you may well not know some of those words. The other thing that happens, given what I've just said about hearing and verbal short-term memory and processing information, children with Down syndrome often have inaccurate phonological representations of words in their head. So they haven't heard the t in cat, so they've just got stored up there, or even better still, they haven't got the t, so they haven't got the first sound, so they've just got at. That's the that cats, instead of saying cat, you say, what's that? It's at. If it's not stored accurately up here, it's going to be a challenge. If you just to say to a child, how do you spell stairs? And their word is dares, what begins with a d. So you can see how blending and segmenting is going to be a bit of a challenge. However, what phonics is great at is then visually showing them lots of these sounds that are missing, showing them what sounds should be at the beginning of cat or the end of cat, or what's that stairs actually begins with a, and I can see that, a note. Now that's going to be a prompt for me to try and say those words. So I normally start by using the sight word strengths. So I'll be starting by visually going, this is cat. We're going to, let's say we're going to blend it. We've got k, ah, Can you say them? You know these letter sounds. At. Brilliant. We're going to blend them, put them together. Cat. So see it. Nice bit of visual first, and then I'm going to do it without the without those visuals. And again, thinking about how clearly children are able to say some sounds. They might not be able to say s very clearly, but if they have a go at saying it, you know that's their attempt for saying it. You know that they know it, but want to be working on it. Might speak to the speech and language therapist when they come in, but particularly if they're having a go at saying those sounds, then you're moving on to your next set of sounds once you know them. As I said, difficulties with vocabulary. So you might want to think about choosing appropriate letters that are going to make words the child already knows, or you're going to need to be thinking about teaching some of that vocabulary. So do they know the word first? Do they understand what beginning means, or last means, or sound means, or what talking like a robot means? And if you think about those first SAT, PIN, SAT, past tense verb, got tricky. We got difficulties with tense marking. PIN, probably try to keep pins away from them until now. TIN, and then you've got all of those little grammar words, the at and the in and the is, that they may well not be using in their language. We want to think about what vocabulary we're working with. As I said, use the visual supports and then move away from those visual supports. So having those letters, using memory boards, things like phoneme frames are brilliant. Really showing them what it is. That's how we're doing the teaching, with all of those visuals. And then once they understand what the task is, we can then start to reduce some of that extra visual support. Think about how you can break things down into smaller steps. So can the child, rather than having to blend from their own production, always I've got to say all those sounds, I've got to remember those sounds that I've said, I've got to then match them to a word in my head that might not be quite accurate. Playing games where they're blending from others, from the adult or from another child, and better listen to their sounds, or what's it going to be. You can then make them a bit quicker, give them a bit of support. The other thing that can be helpful is working on onset rhymes. So instead of doing k, at, they're doing k, at. So you learn that at, what makes at, we'll learn that, and then we'll just work on hearing, identifying that first sound to start with. So there's just some examples I've got. You can see the vocabulary cards on there for pin, tin, sit, pit, so I actually make sure they know what it is that they're working on. There's some sounds in the middle there, the CATHBM. I might start by choosing those letter sounds to work on, because they're going to make words that the child is more familiar with. So I can do my cat and my hat, my mat and my bat. The bottom right-hand picture there is of that kind of memory board. So I'd say, take out that H to start with, and I'd say, oh, we're going to cover these up. Let's have a look. What's the first one? It's ah. Can you say that? Ah, brilliant. Cover that one up. What was under there? Can you remember? It was ah, fab. And then next one is ah. Can you say that? At. Let's practice it. At. Lovely. Cover them up. What's this one? At. Once they've got at, they say, right. First one I'm going to do is hat. What comes first in hat? Let's have a look at our picture card. You can see to start with. We'll need a lovely. And then what's the next one? Ah, you're right. Can you remember the next one? So, and I would do that until they're really familiar and can do that with that at family. And then I would move on to a different rhyme. It's just some additional activities, thinking about can they tell you or sort items by, do they start with the same sound? What words end with the same sound? Again, I'd have my pictures there. Which ones start with this? What's that start first sound? What vocabulary are you using? What do they know? And then remove those words over time. Sorting by initial sound. Once they've got initial sound, I'd go to final sound, and then finally working on that medial sound. Can they manipulate sounds in words? What does stop make if you take this off? Start by stop. Written down there. I'm going to take this off. What is it? Let's read it together. Again, all of those visuals. Syllable awareness is an important skill. They're able to tap out syllables. They can hear different parts of words, and they can break words down and then concentrate on sounding those smaller parts, smaller segments of the word out one at a time. Rhyme activities, being able to understand what rhyming is, rhyming means. Again, I would start visually, so I would have some words, let's say, stick with our at words, and I'd have all the at in a particular colour, and then we're going to sort out all these ig words. We're going to sort them by rhyme, which is the at words or the ig words. You can see to start with, and then when you know what you're doing, that's when we're going to move on to the next thing. It's really important that we take time to teach the task. So wherever it is that your child is, the people you're working with is, making sure we're going to set a target. Can you tell me, if I give you a word, can you point to what's the first sound? Can you point to the last sound? Can you point to the next sound or the middle sound? Can you point to words? Can you point to sentences? Making sure that they really understand what it is we're asking them to do. Lots and lots of practice with support, not just asking them. Want to show them what it is we want them to do until they're really clear. So I've got my sight word targets, I've got my phonics targets, and then I'd also be looking for a reading comprehension target. For children with Down syndrome, we know reading comprehension, well, for all children, reading comprehension is linked to listening comprehension. And of course, we know our children have got the speech and language delay. Reading comprehension is affected by vocabulary knowledge, so just the words you know. And again, we know that might be a bit delayed. In language level, so in terms of putting words together, we get understanding and all of that grammar, and working memory, which again, particularly in terms of verbal memory, is tricky. It's reading comprehension is typically behind word reading levels, so the child may be great at recognising words, that's their strength area, but they're having more difficulty with this reading comprehension, and of course if they're having difficulty with language, you'd be expecting them to have difficulties with reading. So it might be helpful to start, when you're working on reading comprehension, having a slightly easier book. So you've got your word reading book, that's where we are with our over 90% we can read fine. If we're working on reading comprehension, probably want a book that we can read 100% fine to start with, so we can focus on really that comprehension. And I've just got on there as a reminder for me, think about if you're testing reading versus testing language. So if the question isn't the same as the words in the book, we're starting to make things a little bit more tricky. I need to think of an example. If it said the boy got the ball in the net, and the question is who scored the goal, well, it doesn't say who scored the goal. You have to understand who. Just question word's tricky in the first place. You also have to know what scored and goal means. That doesn't necessarily mean you didn't understand what you read, but the question didn't understand the question so much. So it's always worth thinking about what we're testing and what additional demands are there. So in terms of strategies for supporting reading comprehension, obviously using the picture, explaining to the child, scaffolding for the child, showing the child, the boy and girl went to the, don't know that word, let's have a look. Where do you think they're going? Let's have a look at the picture. So no, they can pick up some useful cues from that picture. Using the text around, so covering up a word so they can't see it, can we work out what that word could be? Reading around, understanding, again, that language, what word could go in there. Matching words or sentences to the right picture or page in a book. It's a really nice early comprehension activity. If we think about our personal books or our good old Oxford Reading Tree books, if you can match the word mum to the picture of mum, I know that you know that. That can be a nice independent task. Match your target words to the correct picture. I've got on there about questioning. I think that's something we obviously all use all the time, asking questions as we're reading to support the understanding, to check that the child is understanding what they're reading. Be aware that question words are tricky themselves. Often the child will know that there's a question, but they might get muddled up between if it's a who question or a what question. Work practice answering questions, so that probably the adult is going to be asking the questions and they're going to be answering them. Teaching them the look back strategy, so you look back in the text to find the answer. And when I'm starting with kind of early reading comprehension, what I would be thinking about is writing questions as the child reads, which contain the text that is in the book. So if the example on the right there, who said, "Oh bother," the text would have said, "Mum said, oh bother." So we're looking back to find "oh bother," and we're reading around to say, "Oh, who is it? Oh, look, it's Mum. Who got a new water bottle? Dad got a new water bottle." You can see the story, but it's important that they know to look back and to find the answers. And then a much later skill really is to be able to ask questions. So for the child to be able to come up with questions about the book, thinking about what happened in there, what might they ask somebody else. You could start with some general questions, so things like who was the story about, or what was your favourite part of the story, where did the story take place. You practice the same, asking the same questions before they're ready to move on in terms of developing their own questions. And I've just put on the end there for the child to be able to identify when they're reading any words that they don't know, one in terms of reading, and two in terms of actually what it means. So one of my secondary school pupils, we did quite a bit of work really around the fact that although she could read the word, because she was a great word reader, did she really understand what that word meant? And could she highlight in the bit at the beginning any words that she wasn't sure of, so that we can make sure that she's aware of her reading comprehension and what she needs to get help with, but also we can then provide that support. So reading comprehension skills, things like narrative skills, being able to retell a story, going back to those wordless books that we had at the beginning, breaking longer stories down into sections. When children then move into reading longer books, chapter books, are obviously not going to read everything in one go. It can be quite nice to just retell that little bit, maybe do a little picture for that little bit. You can go start to use those to sequence pictures or sentences about the story. Thinking about how that skill, you can be working on that skill in other ways, retelling events about what they've been doing themselves. So I understand there's a beginning, the kind of the narrative story structure, beginning, the middle, the end. I've got a conversation diary. I can tell you a little bit about where I went on Saturday, or what I did last week at school, and I've got those pictures there to support me. So use photos and use videos as much as you can. It could be just about something you've just set up. So it could be a quick, I don't know, fine motor activity. We do a video of it, then can you retell me what you did? I'll have a look at that video as you did it. Use of pictures and puppets, often motivating, and can show you a little bit about their understanding of the story. And any of those visuals that you use for all other children, they're the things like the storyboard or the story mountain, or having a beginning, middle, end label. Use those to support reading comprehension activities, use those to support writing activities. That kind of visual, not too many, or one that I really know how to use well, they can be really, really beneficial. And maybe having choices for who, what, where, when, or having a visual prompt to help understand who's about a person, where's about a place, what are they doing. Summarising, I said a little bit about reading these chapter books, so you're not reading the whole thing, doing a little summary about what you've read. So I've read to the class teacher, I've read to the parent. Now stopping there, what happens in this section? Let's write a little summary so that when you read to the next person, I can say, oh, what's happened in the story so far? You've got your little summary of that section. Again, sequencing activities, so sequencing some pictures from the story and then using those to summarise what happened. Again, offering choices is a really good strategy to use as much as possible, really, across all things, I think. So many positives about offering choice, but did it happen here or did they go here? Who was it, this person or was it that person? Having those prompts, using your storyboards again, having those question prompts or having cueing cards, so just some key words about the story that they can then use to kind of hook on their summary. Can they sort words or pictures? What was in the story? What was it about? Was it about a beach? Yes, yeah, put that in there. Was it about a forest? No, don't put that one. Wasn't in the book. And then finally, I've just got on there about predicting and inferencing. Those are more challenging skills, answering inferencing questions so that the information isn't written in the text. I can't look back and find the facts. I've got to think about what clues are in there. We're thinking about linking back to their own experiences and knowledge. Again, lots of scaffolding around this. Oh, look, what's on the front cover of this story? It looks like it's a beach. What do you think might happen in the story? I know when I go to the beach, I like swimming in the sea and I like eating ice cream. When you go to the beach, what do you like doing? Do you like going to lots of scaffolding, lots of modelling for the pupil? Again, offering choices, so it's useful for everything. But also, do they understand cause and effect? Or I'm going to sit on my beach, going into the water. What do you think's going to happen? What can you see happening over there? And again, giving that choice. Linking to that is that understanding causal events, so being able to use connectives and so, because, but, if. And also, it's important just to make sure that the child understands about guessing and predicting, that there are some things that lots of things that we don't know, but we're just having a guess. Often the child might say, or don't know. Oh, no, don't know. We're just going to have a guess. What do you think? Let's see if we're right. It's not always about knowing the answer. Sometimes it's about just having that confidence, understanding what guessing or predicting is all about, to have that go. So I've got some example activities on there. You can see the question prompt cards. You've got the who, why, what, when, where, with a few clues about time and person. I've got an adapted reading book in topic book in there. So this is it's all about space. This is planets. This is Mars. This is Earth. This is where I live. You could easily do what colour is Mars? Where do you live? So you look back, find the right page, and do a bit of reading comprehension about it. Reading comprehension, particularly as the child becomes a more and more competent reader, gets older in secondary schools, reading comprehension really can be part of every lesson. If you think about when the teacher is talking and giving that information, well, that's when we're going to struggle to get that information, because we've got those hearing difficulties, we've got those verbal short-term memory difficulties, we've got this auditory processing difficulty, we've got speech and language difficulties. That verbal input is really, really hard. But if I've got some text I can read, I'm going to remember it better. It's going to be there, so I can look back at it when I need it. We can simplify it so it's at the right language level for their input. They can even do some reading comprehension questions about the input whilst it's going on. And then the third example there is just a story summary. So what happened at the beginning, what happened at the middle, what happened at the end, and you can see you've got the question prompt pictures there, just to give them a bit of framework for that. I've just put on things to consider or avoid. Having too many words or sounds at a time. When we go through phonics with the class, and I would be very keen for the pupil to be in there when you're going through all of the letter sounds, to be hearing those sounds, practicing saying those sounds. It's all going to be great practice. But in terms of how many I know, I'll be looking at maybe 4 to 6 at a time, and then once I know those, then I'm going to move on to the next ones. Just to mention the use of actions or pictures or symbols. Many phonics schemes come with a picture and maybe a little rhyme that goes with it, or an action that goes with it. Our target is obviously to know the letter sounds. So again, actions, pictures, symbols may well be there for the rest of the class, and may well be there in the beginning for our pupils, but they shouldn't be moving on until they know the actual letter itself. Not only if we do it with a bit of an action to prompt, which can sometimes happen. And then I've got on there the symbol systems, so symbol systems like widget. As I said, word reading is often a strength for children with Down syndrome, and I'd be very keen to start off with teaching. We're working on reading. I want to start off with the written word, and I wouldn't be going down that route in terms of teaching reading. Anytime you have to learn a symbol, that's something extra to learn. So things like, if we look at the first example there, well, I'm going to say that's red ball, was clock. I've got to now learn that's was what I've got to learn what as was, and that's my target at the moment. And when we're thinking about reading comprehension, I'd be looking for pictures that support the understanding of the sentence or the bit of text that you've read, rather than every word. So the other example there with the wolf, we say we've got he, it's the wolf, said, well, it's not the wolf that's saying, it's a person that's saying, little pigs, I'm quite happy with pigs. Let, I don't know what that is. Me, well, that's a person again. Come in. Now, I think that looks very confusing in terms of the wolf saying anything or the wolf coming in the door. So just be aware of making sure you're supporting reading comprehension, and if you're using those symbol systems, how you're using them. Look out for random or not useful words. So I said about those high frequency words and teaching them how to use them from the beginning. Obviously, as they become more and more competent readers, you're going to be introducing them to loads of different vocabulary words across loads of different topics. But thinking in the beginning, what we don't want is a book like Fruit Salad, where the words in there are, banana, grapefruit, apple, orange, kind of thing, any fruits now. But there are words that you're going to learn in this book, and then they're not going to come up in the next book. So I want to think about ones that are going to certainly be useful. And I said about the level of the book, 90 to 94% is an instructional book. So really the child should be able to read most of the words that are in that book. Okay, so just to summarise, think about setting targets across sight word reading, phonics or alphabetic reading, and reading comprehension. Consider any additional reading opportunities. We can get in a bit more practice. So following instructions, having it written down on the desk once the child's obviously reading. I need my maths book, ruler, and a glue stick. If I can read that, I haven't got to wait for an adult to tell me. I can use that support for myself. Find the items on a list. Again, read that word, find that item, answer the questions on page 1, whatever it might be. Target reading across the curriculum. If you can think about ways you're going to get these words into every activity that you do. And again, if you start with those high frequency ones, get lots and lots of practice, get them in kind of everywhere. Seeing the Romans and the anywhere you can. And if you have a child who has already got a bank of words, making sure you use that reading strength across the curriculum. So when you're introducing them to new concepts, think about things like maths. I would start off by, when I'm doing time, I would label the clock. O'clock, stick it at the top. I can see it, I can remember it, that's visual. That's going to help me remember where that is. Half past goes at the bottom. I can see the word, I read the word, I learn the word. It helps me remember it later on.